Hello and welcome to this tutorial on Lokalise. My name is Ilya and today we are going to discuss how to get started with React internationalization with the help of i18next. The textual version as well as the source code can be found under the video description. Alright, so let's get started, and the first thing to do is to actually create a new React project. So let's do that. Well, it will take quite a lot of time, so let me pause the recording and I will get back to you in a moment. Okay, welcome back. So let's change directory into Lokalise React, and next I would like to install some necessary dependencies. First of all, that's going to be i18next. That's going to be our main start today, because that's a framework that allows you to translate JavaScript applications. Then we should add the library to support React. Then also we're going to perform automatic language detection, therefore add this language detector. And finally, we will need this HTTP backend, because we're going to load our translation files asynchronously. So here is our project, and the first thing that I would like to do is, to create our translation files. Therefore, here under the public directory, let's create a Locales folder. And then you will need to decide what locales you would like to support. I'm going to support two locales. The first is English and the second is Latvian, but of course you can choose other languages as well. And then inside you should create these translation.json files. So the directory structure should look like this. Later it is possible to add more translation files. If, for example, you have lots of translation keys, it's possible as well. So you can create multiple namespaces in i18next, but to keep things simple, I'm going to use one translation file. And next we should actually initialize i18next. So inside the source directory, let's create i18n.js file. And here we should import all the necessary dependencies that we've just installed. And next, let's actually use the following approach. We are going to say i18n, which is imported here on the first line, and we're going to say use backend. And the same can be done for other plugins, for example, for these two. And then you can say init. So to initialize i18n next, we're going to enable the debugging mode, and our fallback language will be English. So when the requested locale cannot be found, in this case, we're going to revert to English. And then don't forget to say export, just like this. So that's our configuration file. Next, this file must be imported inside index.js file, for example here. So let's say import, just like this. Brilliant. This file doesn't require any additional changes, so let's close it. And then we should actually open the app.js file, because that's our main file for today. I'm going to actually remove all this sample data. We don't need it. Also, we can remove these imports, and instead let's import two things. First of all, the suspense component, and second, use translation from React i18next. Now, so why do we need this suspense component? Well, the idea is that as long as we are going to asynchronously load our translation files from this locales folder, we have to wait until those files are actually ready to be used, and therefore we have to use this suspense. As for this use translation, it's like the main entry point, we can say, and next here inside the app function we can say t and i18n should be taken from this use translation. So this T function will be used to do the actual translations, and i18n will be used to switch the language. Let's also add an h1 header. For now it is going to be empty, but we are going to provide translation for it later. And then we should use the suspense component. Therefore let's remove this part, and we're going to say it's our wrapped app, and we will return suspense. Just like this, you can provide a fallback if you'd like, something like loading, and make sure to add app here. So now everything should be golden and we should be good to go. Alright, the next question is how do we actually provide our translations, because here I would like to display an h1 header. And well, first of all, let's open translation.json inside this English directory. And here you can provide translation keys and their values. So for example, you can say header, that's the key that we will use inside our source code, and the value is welcome to the app. So basically, whenever the application is served to the end user and the English is set to language, this translation key will be replaced with the following value. But also it is possible to introduce nesting. So nesting is a good idea when you have lots of translation keys and you would like to separate them somehow. So here is nesting, main is like a parent key, and this is like a child key, okay? And also we have to specify Latvian translation, so let's say something like that. Please note that the key names must be identical, of course, whereas translation values, well, those will be different. Now, how do we use these translations? Well, in reality, it's nothing too complex, so we have to use this T function and provide the key name to it. So, for example, right here, I'm going to say T, and we're going to say main.header. So main is the parent key, and the header is the child key. And as long as we have nesting, we should separate those keys with this dot. And now when the app is served, this thing will be replaced with the actual string taken from one of these translation files. Brilliant. Now we can say npm start to actually boot our application and make sure that everything is working fine. And so take a look at that. It says welcome to the app. Great job. You can check the source code and it's a simple text. So we don't see any traces of this T function anymore. Actually, we can check the network tab to make sure that our translation file is actually loaded. And it says welcome to the app, so that's the file that we've requested. Please note, by the way, that we don't load Latvian translations because they are not used anywhere, but the language is English, and therefore we have no reason to actually load Latvian. And that's actually a good thing, because this way we, optimize this overall flow. Of course, we can change the language. For now, we have to do it inside this i18n file. For example, here, let's say change language and set it to Latvian. Then we can return to the browser, we can reload the page, and we can see that here is the Latvian translation. So everything is working fine, but, well, of course, it's not very convenient to switch the language in the following way. Therefore, let's introduce a language switcher. And first of all, I would like to add this locales constant with all the locales that we actually want to support. And now, well, the idea is really simple. We're going to display an unordered list with the buttons to switch the locale. Alright, so here is the unordered list for you. We use object keys, then we simply use map to display those li elements. Don't forget to provide the key as always. And then here is our button. So we're going to display this style bold when the current language equals to the locale in question, because, well, that's actually we are iterating over all the locales. And then on click, we're going to change the language just like we did in this file a moment ago. And that's it. Then we just provide the title for this locale, like a native title, yeah. And, well, that's our language switcher. As you see, nothing too complex. So let's reload the page. We can see that, well, the translations were loaded, but now when I click English, you can see that a new translation file has been loaded for us. So it happens only when we actually switch the language, and once again, it's a good thing. Okay, now let's talk about other i18next features that we have access to. For example, let's discuss pluralization, because it's a very common task to achieve. And well, first of all, I would like to import a use state from React. It's not like mandatory, but I would like to show you something. Next, let's actually use state here, just like this. So I would like to display how many messages the user currently has, and we're going to display a button to increase this count. Therefore, let's provide some additional markup. So we have a button to set the count to +1, and here is the main thing to take a note of. So once again, we're using this t function, and we're providing the key's name, but in this case we also say how many messages the user currently has. So well, messages is taken from the use state, but I would like to actually pluralize this string properly, because for example, we can say you have one message, but you have 5 messages, 100 messages, or maybe 0 messages, basically, right? So this is pluralization for you. And luckily, English have simple pluralization rules, really. So there are only 2 forms, one and other, basically. But unfortunately, other languages can have more complex pluralization rules. For example, in Latvian, there are 3 plural forms, whereas in Russian it can be 4 plural forms, etc. And therefore, we have to take this into account. And luckily, i18next does the heavy lifting for us. So all we have to do is we need to pass this object, provide the actual number here, and please note that this attribute must be called count. It's very important, otherwise pluralization will not work for you. Okay, and once you have done that, we can provide different variants for this message. And let's start with English because it's more simple. And here are 2 variants. Please note that here we must use new messages, because here we are using new messages as well. And to provide different forms, we use this postfix, one and other. So those are like built-in names for different plural forms. And in this case, we say one message, and in this case, we have count messages. So count it's like an interpolation. We take a value that was provided here for us, this count variable, we carry this variable here, and then we are using interpolation to actually display this count for our users. That's the idea of interpolation. As you see, nothing complex. Now, as for the Latvian translations, we have 3 forms, therefore let's say like this. So we have a 0 form when there are no messages. Here we have one message, and once again here we use pluralization and say you have like many messages, more than 1 and not 0. That's the idea. Okay, now let's save it and let's return here to our app. And now it says 0 messages. Let's say +1, +1, +1. You see it's being pluralized properly for us. And same goes for Latvian. Let's actually update this. It says Vienna, Zinya, which means 1, and then 2, 3, 4, etc., etc. Brilliant, but yeah, there is actually a problem, because when we reach 10, it says once again you don't have any new messages with it, which is actually a problem. Which means that, well, you know what, let me copy this thing and let's say it like this. because it seems like this 0 form actually covers 10, 20, 30, etc. Now let's discuss how to work with date and time. And to do that, we actually need to install additional dependency, which is called Luxon. It's well, a new solution that was introduced to supersede Moment.js, which used to be a very popular solution back in the day, but now, well, it's like outdated. Therefore, we're going to use Luxon. And I would like to display the current date on my web page, and I would like to localize it properly. Now, therefore, here let's add yet another paragraph looking like this. So once again, that's the name of the key, and once again we are providing this object here, and we're going to use interpolation. So this thing, this property, can be called anything you'd like, really. So we are just providing some kind of a value to use when formatting the date. So let's save it and let's return to English translations. And here we can say today is, then once again interpolation, but we also must provide the name of the format to use. So how exactly this date must be formatted, because you understand that we can say something like this, or we can say something like this, or we can be even more specific and say that's Monday maybe, or something like that. So we have different date and time formats, and that's why we have to provide it here. And the same should be done for Latvian. So the format name is the same, but it should be localized properly. And to perform localization, we will actually use this Luxon solution. So let's open i18n file and let's import date time module. And then here at the bottom, before exporting everything, you should say something like that. So we are adding a new formatter, which is called date long. You can give it basically any name, and it accepts a value to localize, the currently set language, and any other options that you may take advantage of. And then we're using this from.js date taken from Luxon, so we are converting it to a proper object. And then we're actually localizing everything properly with the currently set locale. And this format is taken from Luxon once again, but it has lots of additional formats. Maybe there is date short, as you can see, date time short, date time with seconds, etc. So lots of available formats. You can find them in the official documentation. And having done that, we are actually good to go. So I'm going to say npm start once again, and let's reload everything. And guess what? We can see that today is Monday, so that's like today's date, and the same applies to English, so it's Monday. Brilliant, the best day really. Yeah. All right, so we've seen how to localize date and time, and now let's see how to provide additional context. So when you can take advantage of context, for example, when you would like to display gender specific information. So for instance, I would like to say that you have a new message from maybe Anne or from John maybe, and then you would like to display message contents. And here I'm going to say something like she writes or she says, and then how are you doing? But problem is this she writes should be adapted properly based on the, well, user's gender. So if it's from John, then we would say he writes, yeah. And so that's where context steps in. And so I'm saying that's the body of the message, but also I'm providing the context and saying that's a female. It's very important to give this attribute the context name, because otherwise it's not going to work. And then we can actually provide different variants for this message contents translation. Let's see how to achieve that. First of all, I would like to take care of the incoming message. It's not complex really, so we can say you have a new message from, and then we are providing the name of the person who wrote to us. Then we should provide something like that. So the base key name should always stay the same. It's the message contents. But we are providing this postfix with the context. So it's like a, gender neutral variant, then male and then female. It's important to preserve the original key name. And the same can be done for Latvia, so the idea is the same. Okay, let's check it out, and it says you have a new message from Anne. She says, how are you doing? And the same works for Latvian. Brilliant. And the last thing that I would like to show you today is how to actually extract all your translation keys into translation files so that you don't need to do it manually. For example, here I can add like a new translation key, main new key, for example, and of course I can create it manually just by copy pasting it here to this file and to this file, but well, I am quite lazy to do that all by myself. Therefore I would like to prepare some kind of a script that does heavy lifting for me, and you can use the following solution. It is called i18next parser. So let's install it, and then you should create a new file with all the configuration. It should live inside the project root i18next parser config.js. Actually, this config is really simple. So you are providing the default namespace, which is translation, and so this namespace actually corresponds to the file names that are utilized here. Then you are using one of those lexers, so we will use JSX lexer, because inside JS files we have JSX content, right? Then you are providing your locales, and then you are providing the output file and directory. And so input is what files you actually would like to scan. We would like to scan those JS files. And then you can just save it, and we can create a new script inside package JSON, for example, something like that. So it's going to be called extract translations. We are providing the configuration, and we say fail on warnings. So if something goes wrong, we're going to halt the operation. And then you can, guess what, you can run this script. So let's do just that, and let's see what's going to happen. So it scans all your JS files, so 6 files, and then it actually creates old files with your old content, so it doesn't overwrite your content directly, and it creates a new file with all your translation keys, right? So let's check what's inside, and guess what? Here is our new key that we've just created. Great job. Unfortunately, it might mess with your old content. So for example, I can see that, this message context mail is missing for some reason. I'm not sure why. So it for some reason it moved it here. I don't know. So maybe it thinks that those are duplicates, or I'm not sure, to be honest. But we can bring it back. It's not a big deal. But all in all, it's quite a powerful solution, really. Let's restart our application, but there is one thing that I would like to mention. So we have created a new key, but it doesn't contain any translation, and so that's like an empty string, and by default this will be displayed just as empty string, and it might be hard for you to understand which translations are actually missing when browsing this app, because you simply don't see this translation at all, and you're not sure what's like going on. And to overcome this problem, you can actually open this file and add the following configuration. Return empty string and set it to false. And in this case, instead of displaying an empty string, it will display the key name itself on the page. And now, if we return here, we can see main new key. So you can understand that definitely something is wrong here. So something is amiss, and you should probably provide a translation here, and maybe it's a good idea to actually disable this option. And that's pretty much it. So in this tutorial we have discussed how to get started with i18next and React. Hopefully this video was useful for you. That's it for today, folks. Happy coding, and see you in other videos.